Order. Order. Sure. Oh, good, good. Yapil. Can members take your seat? Oh, Shonish.
Mafika sukuma mkhwenyana.
No doubt. Greetings to the Honorable Speaker, and Boys, the Honorable Premier in absentia, who tendered his apology due to another commitment which he could not postpone. And I believe that the leader of government business will actually take that item. Greetings to all members of the legislature, the Auditor General, and all the key stakeholders present, including officials. In the book titled Our Iceberg is Melting, John Cotter and Hugo Radgeber shares a story of 268 penguins who lived in a colony. One of them was Fred, and Fred was different from most penguins in one very important way. Fred was unusual, curious, and observant. Fred fished less and studied the sea and iceberg more. He frequently went off by himself to take notes on what seemed right to him, and as a result, he was becoming increasingly alarmed by what he saw. Fred had a briefcase full of observations, ideas, and conclusions. Yes, the penguin had a briefcase full of studied and observed information. Today, we express our gratitude to both the Office of the Speaker and the Office of the Auditor General, who made it possible that we, the members of the KwaZulu-Natal Legislature and all the key stakeholders present today, to receive this briefing by the Auditor General on the 2023-2024 KwaZulu-Natal audit outcomes as outlined by Chapter 9 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa on state institutions supporting constitutional democracy, Section 188, 189, which speaks to functions of the Auditor General and tenure. Section 1883 says Auditor General must submit audit reports to any legislature that has a direct interest in the audit, and all reports must be made public. Hence, we have this briefing session today. I believe the Auditor General, like Fred the penguin, has a briefcase stuffed and full of observations, ideas, and conclusions. The Auditor General brings this information to us. What we do with the information brought to us is up to each individual present here today. As members of the legislature, all present here, I request that we listen, take notes, and use the information which we will get here to make informed, meaningful contribution in our respective portfolios. We must listen to others as we are to listen to the Auditor General today. Thinking differently can change behavior and lead to better result. In the media release dated 29 November 2023, the AG reported overall improved audit outcomes and called for government to enhance planning and service delivery, monitoring and reporting. The report pointed out that there are still weaknesses in planning, monitoring, and reporting on delivery service, challenges in infrastructure management, and increasing pressure on the fiscus due to a lack of prudence in spending. The Auditor General expressed that concerted effort from all the accountability ecosystem will lead to further improvement. I still say we need the public to trust us. Therefore, let us do our best. Marco Saravanja says, if you do your best, whatever happens, it will happen for the best. Maya Angelo concurs and says, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Again, we express our gratitude to Auditor General. Okay. General Ms. Tsakan Maluleke and her delegation comprised of the following: Uvanuja Maharaj, Head of Portfolio; Nomalungelo Mkhize, Business Unit Leader; Harold Maloga, Head of Communications; Merusha Vata, Deputy Business Unit Leader; Kabiso Madlala, Deputy Business Unit Leader; Nombulelo Ngume, Stakeholder Liaison Manager. The next will be Tendani Landela, Senior Manager. However, at this point, may we allow the Speaker of the KZN Legislature, Ms. Nontembeko Boyce, to give welcoming remarks for 5 minutes. I'm saying this with pride because he used to be the one who gave people order to speak.
Thank you, Chief Whip, Honorable Kwala, the Program Director for the day. Greetings to the AG and the team from the AGSA. To the leadership of government, I see the leader of government, business, and I know that I've received an apology from the Premier and the entire members of the Executive Council, members of the Provincial Legislature, KwaZulu-Natal, Secretary of the Legislature. I want to greet all of you. Ngwanase, Shengele, and Timande, we are all welcoming you, the 4 of us. As the presiding officers, we want to welcome you to the House of the People of KwaZulu-Natal, and particularly that we are welcoming you, AG, in the 7th term, where we know that we are starting a term where already we understand perfectly how we are moving in terms of audit. When we know at the beginning, towards the end of the 6th term, we were a little bit still finding ourselves, especially when you were going into the performance of portfolio committees. And we are now of the same mind in understanding that 30 years later, it should not only be about the performance of that financial year, but it should also be about the long-term impact of oversight in the entire cycle of accountability. But also, we also understand as the presiding officers that the importance of today is not about us hearing how the PFMA and FAMPLA auditees have done, but is also giving life to the cooperative nature of governance as mandated by the Constitution of the Republic. And how actions, missions, and inactions from any of us, whether you are on the executive or on the oversight and lawmaking, have a direct impact on the service delivery that is received by the electorate and also by the citizens of the country. So when we are meeting here today, we know that we have to share, all of us, on our lived experiences, both from the executive and also from the oversight. Share, not just share stories, but share responsibility of the impact we have in the accountability ecosystem that the AGSA is about. Particularly because when the AGSA, through us having to undergo the amendment of the Audit Act of South Africa, had to look deeper and go into the performance of portfolio committees. There are things that we ought to have done, we might not have done them. I will, for instance, in our case, the issue of the scaling down prior to elections, which we should have abandoned immediately. And we have to share that as you speak with us, and it's a commitment we've made to the provincial management of your office that the program going forward will not have any scaling down because we understand the impact of the audit. But also we have noted that the economic climate that we are under in the Republic currently is the 7th term. Need us to internalize it. We did that during the onboarding and also during the appropriation season that we had earlier. That there is a lot of things that we must learn, but there are a lot of things that we have to unlearn. Ways of doing things that we thought were right, they are still right, but they are not right for the time. So the understanding of the material conditions, time and space have to be a priority. So we are also, on behalf of the institution, but also led by FAMPLA, we have undertaken to do exactly that. And the chairpersons of committees in their own body in the committees have undertaken to do that. But whilst doing that, it has also come to our attention that there are areas that we need to also focus on, especially areas that may have been easily, you can say it's a lull from our own side, but I take responsibility of that, but others can argue otherwise, including the MEC of Finance may argue otherwise. There is an issue of when there are national pronouncements that are made, especially in a province like KwaZulu-Natal that has been prone to national disasters, which would affect the infrastructure departments. And you find that there would be pronouncements that are made but are not funded. The impact that they would have in the reprioritization of the budget to the departments that are heavy on infrastructure and the impact they have on the audit outcomes of such departments. What do we do? Also, the legislation that is sometimes unfunded. Provincial Treasury would easily send us the certificate, but is not telling us where the money is going to come from. And you find that it's because there is no money from the national level. And the impact is that what you saw, the legislature that is short of about 20 million in its budget of the previous financial year. I think that it's a discussion that we must have and also try to move out of it because it's an agent danger. What do we do also to the social cluster, especially our time bomb, health and education? They are literally broke. I was a teacher and a negotiator. I was last there in 2009. But by 2009, I know that the Department of Education did not have enough budget and the Department of Health to cover its needs in the department, including employment of educators. So I assume that it had grown, both departments, which are heavy on compensation of employees, the impact they have. So when we are welcoming you knowing that we will listen to the audits, but the conversation and the work is also not ending here today. And we hope that the road shows with the AG must now continue beyond the actual tabling of the audit outcomes on means to move forward as a united force premised on Chapter 3 of the Constitution, the nature of our government, to come with solutions. You are welcome, ma'am. Thank you.
As you all are, you are aware that the speakers throughout the world have an unlimited time. So, so I had no option but to allow the speaker to continue speaking. I'm sorry to have a coarse voice, but I'll be fine soon. The next will be the AG. I request Ms. Malulega to address us.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chief Whip, the Program Director for today. I'd like to greet the Honourable Speaker and thank her for the welcoming and opening remarks. Deputy Speaker, Chair of Chairs, Deputy Chief Whip, Honourable Members, I'm aware that the Premier has given his apologies, and I'd like to, at this time, greet the Leader of Government Business along the MECs that are present today. The Secretary of the House, the DG, and I haven't seen the DG, I'd like to greet her if she is around, and the HODs that are present, and other officials. Lift it a bit. Lift my voice. Okay. Oh, have I got the wrong? Okay. Is this better? Okay, thank you very much. I'd also like to greet my colleagues from Team AGSA who've been introduced in turn. Honourable Chief Whip, the audits have been completed for the financial year ended March 2024 in the PFMA and the FAMPLA cycle. Bring it closer. Okay, all right. We're going to try this one. I hope it is better. As I said, the audits have been completed, the reports have been tabled, and they're already the subject of oversight discussions. What we've done as an audit office now is to analyze these outcomes and generate insights which I would want to share with you today. My input is going to be limited to high-level input, which is done because I anticipate or expect that my office would have shared the detail with yourselves in the different committees. The AGSA operates on the basis of a constitutional mandate, which sees us being an independent auditor of the public sector, auditing each and every one of the public institutions every single year. The Public Audit Act in Section 20 specifically provides that we audit and pronounce on the credibility of financial statements, the usefulness and reliability of performance information, as well as articulate whether we have identified any non-compliance with key laws and regulations that deal with financial and performance management. A combination of those three aspects gives us, I believe, a unique perspective on how a public institution is run. And the fact that we audit each and every one of the public institutions every year across the spheres, across the sectors, gives AGSA a perspective that is indeed unique. We aim to use that privileged access to this information, and we aim to use the insight that we have, which is independently generated, but to use it so that we can equip those that are charged with running public institutions to do so better. If they're in the administration, we aim to support them by providing recommendations which, if they implement, will get those institutions operating better. We also spend time with the executive, giving them insight and information and recommendations, which again, if they implement, will get them executing on their given functions even better. And similarly, we spend time with oversight to ensure that you have information that can help you execute on your functions much more effectively. And Honourable Speaker, you talk about the current context, the fiscal environment, the space in which we are as a country in terms of the need for public institutions to deliver services much more effectively, much more efficiently in the context of diminishing resources whilst demands are growing. You also talk about a context where we all have to accept that at the space we're in, we can't be worried only about compliance, we can't be worried only about debits and credits. We equally have to be seized with questions of how do we drive greater impact from the efforts that are being made by different players in the ecosystem. So what we've done is analyze this moment and this set of requirements and accepted that even as an audit office, the type of insight we share must be grounded on an understanding that says public institutions are more than about debits and credits or about compliance. They're about all of that, yes, but also about delivery and impactful delivery. And so what we've also done is understood that if we are to get more and more public institutions delivering more consistently on their given mandates and their predetermined objectives from a performance point of view, then everyone that has been appointed and elected as a steward over a public institution must shift or change how they approach their work. They've got to think about their work around how are they building and positioning that institution so that it does perform consistently, so that it is transparent, so that it is accountable, and indeed so that it is consistently building its own institutional integrity. And so we've got the strategy that we've called the culture shift strategy, because we've understood that what has to change is not so much the laws and regulations, but more about how we all approach our work, given that we all play different roles. And in the next slide, you'll see that we highlight matters about how we all approach who we are in the ecosystem of accountability. And we draw up that picture, which I know will come up on the next slide, which shows how every single player in what we've called this ecosystem of accountability has got particular responsibilities. So when we talk to those in the institutions, such as the senior managers, the officials that are supervised by them, the accounting officers, the internal auditors, audit committees, we craft insights and recommendations that are specific to them. When we deal with the executive, we craft insights and recommendations that are specific to them. When we work and talk to you in the legislature, we craft insights and recommendations that are specific to you. We've also pushed ourselves in the context of doing this work by going to inspect projects. We've gone and seen a number of different infrastructure projects through the course of our audit. And the reason we've done that is not to mesmerize you with pictures of what we found, but to really start to draw the line between poor controls, poor financial governance, poor performance management, and what happens on the ground. We've tried hard to go and inspect projects and understand what goes wrong and give recommendations of how it needs to be fixed. We've gone to look at the condition of particular assets that are already existing. And the work we're doing there is about saying, it's one thing to suggest to an accounting officer that it's important to have a maintenance plan for their infrastructure. A different matter if you can show them the impact of continuing to neglect having a maintenance plan that is decisively and executed in a way that's disciplined. We've gone to inspect how the school nutrition project is running in different schools, so that we can give insight on things that can be done to improve the quality of service that children enjoy. We've gone to look at the scholar transport processes. We've gone to even look at how curricula are being rolled out. And that information we shape so that accounting officers have particular insight on the critical things they need to put in place, either in managing whomever is doing the work on their behalf, but also even in supervising the staff that are in the administration. We've gone to inspect hospitals and primary healthcare facilities, clinics, as part of showing accounting officers what are the key controls that they need to put in place so that this aspiration of how we make sure the money we do have is being deployed to the intended purpose. And in this particular instance, that purpose was about enhancing the quality of the primary healthcare facilities. We've done all of these things, not just with bean counters like I have, but having invested in skills and expertise from people who have an ability to tell us if a quantity surveyor would take off a bill of quantities. And as a result, we've got quantity surveyors that work with us, engineers that work with us, healthcare experts that work with us as medical practitioners. We've also got a number of education specialists that work with us. So that the work we give you is characterized by, yes, a sense of controls, internal controls, and from a bean counter's point of view, let's call it, an auditor's point of view, but importantly, we can show you the impact of weaknesses, and hopefully you're able to translate that into impactful work that does drive change. Let me get to the outcomes now. The province has done well since the beginning of the 6th administration to set a tone about the importance of clean audits, the importance of clean governance. And as a consequence, we've seen some significant improvements, a lot more clean audits than where the 6th administration began, to a point where the 7th administration now has a base that they can build on. You'll see that a good 90% of the PFMA auditees actually have got credible financial statements. So if you combine the green and the yellow, what you see there is that you got 90% of the auditees that are able to put the debits and credits together. Clean audit is where the debits and credits are fine, but also performance information and compliance is also right. The ones that are unqualified, that's where the debits and credits are fine, but they've got a problem on compliance and or performance information. Our appeal to the administration, the executive, and to oversight is to be seized with conversations with accounting officers and executive authorities about how they're going to move out of the yellow zone. For too long, there has been comfort in that category of outcomes. And in that category of outcomes, we find instances where the auditees are not doing what they're supposed to do. And what is the impact of running a procurement process badly? You end up with a project that goes uncompleted. You end up with overpayment for what you receive. You end up paying for things you do not receive. You end up paying for things that are of poor quality. What is the impact of not having service delivery information correct? Well, it tells us that you're not planning for performance correctly, you're not monitoring it, and you're not reporting on it faithfully. The impact is that even though budgets are appropriated, delivery is not consistent with that. The impact of it is that even though citizens are promised specific things at the point that the legislature approves budgets, they end up with projects for 19 years that don't get delivered, and nobody sees it and nobody acts on it. So this yellow category, honorable members, I would urge you to be seized with and to really change the posture of accounting officers that are responsible for auditees that are in the yellow category. For too long, as I said, and I think it warrants repeating, there's been inappropriate comfort in staying in that yellow zone. If an auditee graduates from purple, which is qualified, to yellow, such as the Department of Transport would have done over time, that's good. We would caution and say, don't let them stay there. They must move to the green. Because if they stay there too long, it's quite easy for them to move backwards, such as what we saw in education. The next thing you see them being qualified. That yellow zone is what will help you if you attend to it. Close the gap between what's promised and what's actually being attained. I believe wholeheartedly that part of the trust deficit that has been growing between government and even the legislature on the one hand and citizens is about keeping too many auditees comfortable in that yellow zone. If we get accounting officers genuinely applying themselves to building the type of controls that ensure that what is being planned for is being delivered and reported on transparently, we'll close that trust gap. If we get accounting officers worried about ensuring that the rands that are being put in their hands are being deployed in a manner that's consistent with the rule of law, we will close that gap. We should not continue to tolerate procurement processes that run foul of the existing prescripts. That's what accounts for many of the service delivery failures. I'm not suggesting for a moment that in the green category all is perfect, but in our experience, in the green category, those auditees are doing much, much better than the ones in the yellow and worse still in the purple. One of the things I wanted to just highlight, and I'll probably only stick to this slide, we found that when an auditee is in the green area, such as the Provincial Treasury or the Office of the Premier, we can then have a conversation with them on how are they driving impact on the work that they do. Because they mustn't be happy just to have their own clean audit. They have significant responsibilities in terms of supporting, monitoring, and intervening where other departments and even municipalities are struggling. Now, if they were qualified or unqualified, the conversation becomes more difficult because they're still trying to fix their own house. So when somebody's house is clean, you can really have a conversation with them about impact. And I so appreciated the opening remarks of the Honorable Speaker, where she's saying as a legislature, you are seized with driving impact. Part of driving impact is about making sure that these auditees that sit in the yellow zone move into the green zone. It is there that you can start to have a conversation. We found that because COCTA, Provincial Treasury, the Provincial Legislature, the Provincial Treasury, because they are clean in terms of audit outcomes, their basics are sound, we can have a conversation with them about, Honorable Speaker, how do we get your different portfolio committees structuring their oversight work so that they drive impact? HOD at Provincial Treasury, how do we make sure that we worry about strengthening internal audit across the province? How do we make sure that you're supporting municipalities? How do we make sure that you are stemming this financial viability that's growing within the Department of Health and Department of Education? And in particular, how do we help you make sure that you are supporting and monitoring municipalities? COCTA, how do we make sure you fulfill your mandate and not just wait to intervene when there's already a big problem? But how do you track and monitor that things are happening in a developmental way that is progressively improving, and so that you don't have to wait for a crisis before you act? So I do believe that just even those examples make the case for us around why it's important to worry about ensuring that those auditees, especially in the yellow zone, promptly shift into the green. And at that point, you'll be able to start having a much more impactful conversation. I would urge the House to invest in tracking the resolutions that are being made in the different portfolio committees. We're finding that that is one of the key limitations to impact by the House. But also, the conversations within the portfolio committees, we would urge that as you now are going to approve annual performance plans, worry about what sits in those performance plans. What are you contracting between yourselves and the people that are going to run the department? What are the indicators? What are the targets? Do they cover everything that they should, the priorities that you've all agreed upon? or are there things that are missing? When we audit performance information, we find that sometimes the key mandate issues of particular departments are excluded from the performance plan. And that's where we miss it. Because even if they do everything perfectly, if they've not planned to do something that's important, it's just never going to happen. So I would urge you, at the point of approving annual performance plans, strategic plans, budgets, to be pedantic in ensuring that the annual performance plans are consistent with the priorities that you would have chosen as the public representatives who are acting on behalf of the public. If we do that within oversight, if we have the annual performance plans right, we can then have an opportunity to monitor them on a regular basis and then get to a point where at the end of the year, you have a credible performance report that forms the basis of even your engagement with the public. The tendency has been to not worry enough about this performance planning aspect. Honorable Chief Whip, you would have indicated in your opening remarks that at the end of the 2023 audits, this was the message from our office. We would want to repeat that message. The legislatures, we recommend, should focus on performance information, performance planning, management, and reporting. And if you insist on it, you'll find that the executive insists on it. And if they insist on it, you'll find that the administration also insists on it within their own environment. From our office, we will always be ready to provide you with briefings once we've completed our audits in the normal way. We'll always be available to offer you insight in the normal way that can help you do your work as the oversight mechanism within the legislature. We would also want, maybe one last thing before I close off, Honorable Chief Whip. We were granted new powers as an audit office 5 years ago. And what we have found is that quite often the public representatives will say, AG, we gave you powers. When are you putting people in jail, right? That's a question that prevails everywhere we go. So I think it would be a good thing for me just to spend a few minutes on that. I start off by reminding the House that the powers that the Office of the AG have are essentially a complementary mechanism to drive follow-up on our recommendations and thereby contribute to better consequence management. We don't take over the role of an accounting officer, we don't take over the job of an executive authority, and we certainly don't take over the job of oversight. Our work is to ensure that in the course of our audits, if we find something called a material irregularity, and that's an irregularity where we can see that there's material financial loss, or there's material harm to the public, or harm to a public resource, or even harm to the environment, if we find something like that, then we have to issue it to the accounting officer and call it a material irregularity. The accounting officer still has to act on it. We can't step into their role because the public finance management system in the country gives the accounting officer the responsibility and the authority to respond to audit findings. They are the ones that are supposed to act on an issue we raise in the form of ensuring that the matter is properly investigated, ensuring that they act on the outcomes of that investigation, including disciplining staff because they supervise the staff. They're supposed to refer matters to law enforcement. They're supposed to make sure they cancel contracts where they're losing money. It is only if they fail to act, and when we follow up, we find that they're not doing what they're supposed to do, then we will step in. And we step in by referring the matter for investigation ourselves. We step in by issuing stronger recommendations for them to discipline staff. We follow up by making sure that we take binding remedial action if they continue to fail to do what they're supposed to do. And then we can issue a certificate of debt if they really have failed over a period of time. That period of time feels long, but in many ways it makes sense because You've got to give the accounting officer the space and the time to do what he or she is supposed to do. You've equally got to give the executive authority that supervises them the space and time to do what they're supposed to do. You've equally got to give the legislature the space to also act on the matter. So when we say our powers are great because they allow us to support oversight, to support the follow-up and consequence management processes, but they don't get us to step into the space of those that have been appointed as the stewards responsible for running public institutions. You can imagine if the auditor is now doing what the accounting officer is supposed to do, we then would not be independent. And so it's very important that we continue to remind each other of how those powers are structured and why that is. Where I'm going with this is, through the work we've done, through our MI processes, we've identified material irregularities. We've issued those material irregularities and we follow